Alright, gamers, it is time for a new edition of Unused Content in Games, and today we're continuing with Pokemon Black and White Unused Content. Starting off today with Pokemon Sprites, so why don't we click over here on this Beta Kyurem one, and let us begin. But before we truly begin, I do gaming content like this all the time. If that's your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel, so for any comments, change your mind later on. Anyways, there's some Gen 5 sprites over here that I want to unuse, like this Victini one over here. But first, I want to look at sprites of the first 4 generations, starting off with Generation 1 Mons. There's not too many things notable to say over here with these sprites. There's no notes over here, they just say notes under the notes. But you can kind of see the different progression of the Gen 4 back sprites transitioning into the Gen 5 animated ones. Like you can see with Bulbasaur over here. And then going down the list with every other Pokemon. And Ivysaur is a slightly different green color over here before they get to this tealish one. And you got some different colors of Venusaur's little leaves over here. Well, since there's nothing of, well, not, I shouldn't say nothing of note, but not too much to say about these sprites, I'll just go through the list slowly, and if you need to pause at any point, please consider doing so. But here's all the different Pokemon from Gen 1 with their back sprites. Especially this overly detailed one with Charizard over here. They have to animate more of his back like that? I don't know. But let's keep going down the list. Squirtle's a bit of a different color. Turtle's looking a little similar, slightly different color. And once again, this overly detailed Blastoise sprite. I always missed Blastoise's old Gen 4 sprite. This is pretty cool. This looks a little weird to me. I guess we get these full-bodied back sprites because originally maybe the back sprites were going to be more full-bodied like these. That's probably why they're there. But they decided to dial it back down a bit and have it like this instead of more closer to the screen. So there's a pretty long list, so I'm going to keep scrolling. And I'll point out something if it's notable, as I've done earlier. Well, Jigglypuff's a noticeably lighter color here. But otherwise. Let's keep going with the scrolling. They likely reused a lot of the Gen 4 back sprites for testing purposes. Like, notice the different shading in Vileplume's flower color over here compared to its Gen 4 sprite. Same with Paris being a bit of a different color. This noticeably deeper blue color that Golduck happens to be. Honestly, I kind of like this blue color more than what we got. And Poliwag seems to be a slightly different blue color as well. Alright, almost through this whole sprite page, nothing else too noticeable. I mean, Tentacle having different tentacle colors over here, and the silverish one looks better than whatever this color is with its Gen 4 sprite. And after Farfetch'd, every other Gen 1 Pokemon doesn't seem to have this. They likely ran out of time to really make more of those sprites and just went with the first thing they went with, I guess. Probably started getting the hang of not reusing the Gen 4 back sprites, but going on to Generation 2, from Chikorita and everything downward, nothing else here seems to have any back sprites. So I guess Chikorita got a little special treatment. And you'll see it for both Trico and Turtwig as well. Especially over here where Trico's whatever this color is. Looking more like a real life chameleon than a gecko, I'd say. Anyways, going down the list, no other Gen 3 Pokemon has this. And same with Gen 4. The latest generation pre-Gen 5, of course. And nothing too different. It's Turtwig over here. And going down the list, no other Gen 4 Pokemon has this. That's already that part of the video done. Now, why don't we look at the menu sprites? I could read through some of these descriptions for these Gen 5 Pokemon. Not all of these are honestly all that different. Like, Stoutland's sprite looks a little different over here between versions. But otherwise, most of them, other than this Watchog one, wasn't animated until later builds. And all menu sprites were initially added in that code there, March 8th, 2010 build. But only had the placeholder question mark spread at the time, starting in this code here and then that code there, March 10, 2010. They would begin receiving proper sprites. Basic bobbing up and down animations were added in that one, with the animations proper arriving in that code there. As a side note, the only Pokemon from previous generations to have its menu icon changed was Jirachi, which adjusted the colors of the blue parts of its head to be more on model. Which I don't think we can see here, but that's alright. I kind of like how they had the different dates on which these sprites were changed. Alright, starting off with Victini over here. Right here is further back in the original sprite. Yeah, I can see that. I don't go to the first animations. Once again, I'm not going to read all these because if I do read them, this video will take forever. So let's just skim down, and then if there's any notable differences, I'll point them out. Like Superior over here with its tail downward instead of upward, like in the final. That tail received the same downwards to upwards flip that the main sprite got 2 months earlier, and an extra bit of foliage was added too. Alright, and next up, Emboar. Elbow and tail fluff tweaked, and extra detailing added to the chest markings. Alright, and then we got Samurott, which sprite also looks a little different, I'd say. And the missing tuft of a mustache was added. Along with positioning tweaks to the rest of the mustache and the tail. Alright, with Watchog over here, actually had a unique second animation frame in the first proper icon revision, which no other Pokemon at the time had. Cheeks were changed from light brown to pure white, and torso was redrawn in a less foreshortened pose. Huh, you know, he kind of looks better with the lightly brown cheeks than the white ones we have over here. Personally, I think. And then Stoutland over here. Our lower layer of body fluff was recolored for lavender to light gray, and face was redrawn. And light gray looks a little better. Let's just move through these sprites a little bit faster then. Just most of these are the same, aside from them being animated, of course. Top Strikers over here is a notable one, though. Same with Blitzel's, actually. Blitzel's sprite looks a little different. Our face mane and body stripes were redrawn to be more on model. Especially since this, like, if you look at Blitzel's sprite over here, why is its top part of its mane kind of pointed in that direction? Whatever. Substriker definitely looks really pissed over here, at least more so than usual. Entire sprite was redrawn to be more on model. Face was made shorter and more upturned with the rider, with larger eyes. Body stripes intensified and recolored, and mane and tails repositioned with softer outlining. Alright, and that's what that looks like. Gigalith's sprite's a little different too. Body and leg spikes made bulkier, and missing back spikes were restored. Estrogel's look slightly different. Our body was bulkier and right claws made longer, along with some slight patterning and outlining tweaks. Our nose is a bit different too. Why don't we read that? Ear feelers were redrawn to be more prominent. Arms were reposed with odd red shading on the right arm removed. And tail was made fluffier. The entire Timberline sprites look really weird. Mostly just recolorings, but what is this Kikilder sprite? But look like a Cyclops. Anyways, shoulders bulkier, but face made a bit shorter, along with various shading and patterning tweaks. Alright, let's just keep going. Sazmatel looks like he's seen better days. Alright, arms were reposed to be held farther out. And the light blue patterning on his chin and belly was reworked. Alright, and then we got our fighting type duo over here. Partially redrawn with thinner proportions and extra outlining added to his hands and face. Face made a bit there and into right hand and facing reworked, along with some shading and outlining tweaks. And that's why Luna has a bit of a white texture over here instead. Initially retained the white skin from its early design, otherwise identical to the first animation frame for a final alongside, aside from a 1 pixel shading difference on the right side of the body. Iconium and Whimsicott sprites are significantly different. Drawn to be smaller with less stiffly held leaves. Early outer fluff color matches Whimsicott's. Missing spikes added to its fluff, along with very slight tweaks to its horns and torso. Alright, let's keep going. If there's another notable one, I'll point it out. Crocodile's kinda looks the same, but the colors are a bit different. Partially redrawn with a thinner head, reworked belly, patterning, and back spikes. Its claws held closer together, along with the overall color palette being darkened a bit. Alright, most of these sprites look pretty similar as well. Crustle looks like he's seen some things. Alright, early shell lacks shading and uses more black outlining along the edges, along with slight differences in the stripe patterning. Its eyes are also drawn to look less squashed. Yeah, because really, he's seen some things. To be fair, the final sprite's seen some things too. He's seen worse. And this front claws were made longer in the back. And Scraggy and Scrafty look kind of... Well, Scrafty's sprite is mostly the same. Scraggy's looks kind of dumb. Early sprite is smaller and is turned to have both eyes visible instead of just one. Its tail and added an extra pixel of shading to the torso. Yeah, Mask looks a little different. Redrawn with less horizontally stretched proportions. Darkened outlining on the right hand. And empty space between the mask and the torso removed. Costa looks a little different as well. I'd say it was redrawn in a less closed-off stance, with more on-model flippers and further away from its body. Black facial markings were made less prominent. Outlining on the shell softened and the claws details added to the feet. Trebuchet and Garboda certainly have different sprites as well. Redrawn in a more dynamic pose, with a less cross-eyed expression. Yeah, much less cross-eyed. This looks stupid. Partially redrawn with squatter proportions and a slightly tilted pose, along with some added pink details. Our illusion foxes look a little different as well. Redrawn in a more natural-looking pose with larger and brighter eyes and a smaller tail. That's now shortened a bit. Eyes recolored like its pre-evolution. Ponytail made longer with less red patterning and feet for repositioned slightly. Yeah, as we go down the list, you can tell that more and more of the sprites end up being similar. Well, Duckle and Swannas look a little different too. Redrawn with squatter proportions and much larger wings. Yeah, much larger. These look weird. And an overall brighter color palette. Head redrawn in a more upright pose, with a sterner facial expression and wingtips lengthened a bit. Our face partially redrawn with a more side-facing pose and outlining around its hands, thickened slightly for Vanillite over here. And I might as well read the other two. Identical to the first animation frame from Final. Just that, yeah, you can tell the animation looks slightly different. The ice crystals under its face were repositioned to be more on model, and one pixel of outlining removed near the top of its right head. Otherwise, matches the first animation frames of Final. We got the beers over here that are looking a little different as well. All four forms were drawn to be a bit larger with less stiff posing, softer outlining, and the flowers on its forehead tilted forward a bit. Early summer form sprite uses a darker, bluer shade of green. Yeah, the final sprites obviously look much better than these ones. And honestly, Sawsbook's base sprites look a little uncomfortable, let's just say. All four forms are redrawn with less stiff posing, softer outlining, and larger eyes. Early winter form sprites has upwards posing, pointing antlers, and longer, thinner neck fluff. Most of these sprites still do look the same, so I won't really talk about those too much. And Ferrothorn looks a little different over here with its eyes. Let's read both the evolutions of the Ferrothorn line. Shifted to face forward instead of to the side, otherwise matches the first animation final frames of Final. Shifted to face forward instead of to the side, along with some slight outlining color tweaks to the arms. Yeah, the Ferrothorn sprite looking to the side looks like he's trying really hard not to give eye contact. I don't blame him sometimes. Anyways, most of these sprites are still the same. Nothing too notable over here. Shadowlorse is a little interesting of note, I'd say. Essential flame and main body made brighter, and arms made a bit shorter. Hexorus is widely the same, though its sprite is a little different. Head tilted to the side a bit, eyes made larger and more menacing, claws made more prominent, and gray area of its body made a bit darker. Beartick over here, its arms are repositioned a little bit, that's kind of it. So I don't need to read the description there. Again, if you'd like to pause it and you want to read the descriptions, go on ahead. Dronicus, I'd say, is notable enough. Earliest sprite has a green skin from its original design. Detailing was gradually added and tweaked on the head, wings, and body spikes. So you see this little tealish color, or turquoise-ish color they got going on over here. Bouffalon has a bit of a different color scheme. Early sprites use an odd color palette with bright orange body and light brown afro highlights. Otherwise matches the first animation frame of Final aside from some outlining and shading tweaks around the face. And the entire High Dragon line over here has a completely different color scheme. Well, maybe not completely different, but mostly different, with this beige instead of black color scheme they got over here. Initial sprite uses an odd light brown fur color reminiscent of its early design. Aside from that, front right legs was brought into view and patterning around its torso was adjusted slightly. Uses the same early fur color as Dino, despite never having itself had any battle sprites that depicted that color. Otherwise matches first animation frames of Final aside from its tail being made slightly larger. Which honestly isn't that noticeable, but whatever. Same fur color situation as whales above. Right head, centermost wings, legs, and tails made slightly larger. And going down the list, most of these sprites are the same as well. Let's read the box legendary over here. Sprite nearly entirely redrawn with more on model head tufts and tail. More visible right wing and right foot. Shading added to the left wing and torso. More detailed left wing claw and left foot and darker outlining around the torso and feet. Head tufts barely had orange tips reminiscent of Vershram's overdrive mode, which it was never referred to as that, but okay. Only to be reverted in R3542-7. And now for Zekrom. Arms and feet made larger, longer. Torso and tail is detailing, reworked wing shape, tweaking a bit. And head crest given a blue glow and the tip along with made a bit shorter. Kyurem's placeholder slots from white and black forms were added in that build, the March 20, 2010 build, and later were deleted in May 2017. or did I say 2017? May 27th, 2010. However, they are identical to the normal Kira model menu icon. Honestly, this older one looks a little bit better. But anyways, and this won't be shown here. Head and wings are redrawn to be more on model with light blue shading added to the eye pupils removed, and legs were reposed slightly. And none of these last few models are too different, though Genesec's I think is a little different. Why don't we read these? Front legs redrawn in a more natural pose, along with slight outlining tweaks to the back of the heads and tail. Identical to the first animation frame of final animation. Yeah, it's literally identical. They're moving at the same pace. Like, I think the final spread just has a little bit more animation, but otherwise. For its pirouette form, skirt made longer and head shifted 1 pixel to the left, because that's noticeable. And finally, Genesect, looking mostly different. All forms of Genesect, which are basically which disc it is holding, share the exact same menu sprites, even in the final game. Makes sense, because the only difference is the little chip on the back of the canyon you can't even see. Thus, they will not be shown here. Early sprite features squad proportions, reminiscent of its early design, along with a more saturated redder body color, as you can see here. Alright, that being said, that's all the menu sprites. And now, time for the overworld battle, or just the battle sprites, not the overworld sprites. And we've got a lot of differences here. Unlike that previous one, I'm not going to read all this, because if I were to read this video is going to be like 3 hours long. So, let's just stick with purely visual. Starting off with Victini over here, it's got this whitish color scheme, reminiscent of its shiny design. Which, to this day, at the time of making this video, we still don't have Game Freak. When's it going to happen? Shiny Victini when? I've been wanting that since 2011. When's it going to happen, huh? Anyways, let's look at this beta Snivy sprite as well. I kind of like this. Makes it look more like it would be a dragon type. I mean, for obvious reasons, there's a reason why I know starter Pokemon outside of Mega Evolutions, of course, should have the dragon type. For, again, balancing reasons. Alright, beta Servine over here. We can get a little closer look at that. And beta Superior, while the sprite looks really crude, I guess. This I can see this going in a decent direction. I hope we get that as like some sort of regional form in the future. That'd be sick. I like my boy Tepig. Honestly, final design's better than whatever they were trying to go for here, in my personal opinion. Honestly, this beta Pignite isn't even really that bad. I like this, personally. And then let's look at this back sprite that's just got a bit of odd coloring going on. And I like this beta Ember, honestly. I almost like this more than the final design. This looks really good. Definitely got more detail on it, and definitely looks even rougher and tougher than the final design. Alright, Oshawott doesn't seem to have any beta model, but let's take a closer look at this anyways. This is more reminiscent to its final design. And every time I click back, I don't know why it keeps putting me back upwards a few entries. Alright, Geodude's got a bit of a different pose over here. Still one of the coolest middle stage Pokemon. Up there are Luxio and Porygon too, of course. Alright, Samurai looks mostly the same as well. Alright, for some reason, Lilomola is used as a placeholder for a Petrat and Watchog, which these guys look really dumb. Glad they changed these. I mean, they still look dumb in the final, but whatever. I'm looking at Watchog's front sprite over here. And also this weird coloration over here, though they were getting closer to its final design. As you can see with this, just the detail isn't exactly there yet. Alright, and originally Lillipup was going to be something closer to what Herdier ended up being, like this. As well as when the actual Lillipup design got closer, this design looks a little odd. Just this weird deadpan stare. Glad they changed that, because that just looks weird. Alright, now Herdier's basic model, just with much less detail. Alright, we got Stoutland over here. With not much detail as well. Alright, next up Purloin with a much different color scheme. Kind of looking more like those Tom and Jerry cats. This Beta Lapra design actually looks really cool. It kind of, well, it was already a dark type. It could be a dark fire type with a design like this. especially with the more devilish looking tail it's got going on. I like this more than the final design personally. Alright, Pan Sage, just with much less detail. And I guess which is originally going to be the Hear No Evil monkey instead of the Speak No Evil monkey. Plus this sprite over here, its eyes look a little off. Like he's seen something really bad and he's about to cry about it. Alright, Beta Semi-Sage, I kind of like this design. Has a little cocky smirk. And I guess originally, Panseer was going to be the Speak No Evil monkey. If you didn't know, the elemental monkeys are based on Hear No Evil, Speak No Evil, and See No Evil. With which Panseer being the Hear No Evil, Pansage being the Speak No Evil, and Panpour being See No Evil. Though Panpour was still going to be See No Evil, it seems. But we'll get to that in a sec. This Beta Semi-Seer sprite, man, he a big boy. Knows, maybe they should have stuck with this design. Semi-Seer would have been more liked in Japan. I still like Semi-Seer personally myself. That's just me, though. Alright, Panpour. Yeah, you can tell which monkey is which no evil monkey by their facial expressions. It says Panpour has its eyes closed, obviously the See No Evil. Panseer has different ears compared to the other two monkeys, plus has its hand up by its ear, saying Hear No Evil. And Pansage is the only one of the three monkeys to have its mouth open, as Speak No Evil. And here's a Beta Semi-Poor sprite, which looks dumb. I'm glad they changed this. Alright, Muno's sprite is widely the same, though Muno is a bit larger in the beta version, and then made a little bit smaller. And because that ends up being a bit cuter in the final game. And a little rounder too, it seems. And for some reason, Alomola shows up once again as placeholder sprites. I guess they made its sprite pretty early. Though you have all these weird sprites over here for it. Maybe Alomola is going to have more fins or something initially. But anyways, Musharna is the opposite of what Muno was going to be. It's much smaller in earlier builds, but then made a bit larger. Plus, its coloration's a little different too. Alright, P-Dubs is pretty much the same. Tranquils is pretty much the same. Omphazon is pretty much the same as well. Though there's some small sprite differences I can see here. Like this, its eye kind of looking like it's grown out of the ground with its, whatever that is, I don't know, plumage. Alright, Blitzel looks... honestly looks more like a baby giraffe than a zebra here. Kind of. I'm only saying that mainly because of its pose and its neck. Alright, then we have this other beta sprite over here too. That's very unfinished. Good lord, what is that? Alright, then Beta Zebstrika was going to have a significantly different pose. Like, goddamn. Yeah, again, looks more like a giraffe of some sort than a zebra. It really does. I mean, I'm talking about its body when I say that, but yeah. And then later builds, it's got the same design over here, though its color scheme is slightly different. A bit of a purplish color going on here. Rock and Roll is going to have a different color scheme. And a bit of a shorter body as well, it seems. Kind of glad we got a bit of a design change there. Boulder, actually, I kind of like this Beta Boulder design. It's also slightly shorter, much like Rock and Roll, even though its legs look a bit longer. And this duller color scheme, I think, fits more for the rock typing, personally, than this brighter color scheme we got over here. And the Beta Gigalith looks rough around the edges, and in a good way, actually. Kind of like it. And Beta Woobat, I think looks pretty decent. I kind of wish they stuck with this design. Have its fur be a bit spikier. Alright, Beta Swoobat's pretty much the same thing, just a different color scheme and a little less detail. Alright, Beta Drillbur looks the same, but for some reason it has a placeholder Omphazon sprite with its color scheme, which looks weird. Alright, Escadrille. I did go over this when I was playing my Nuzlocke on the channel, and as a little recap, Beta Escadrille was originally going to have this purplish color scheme, and we see this in some pre-released footage of Pokemon Black and White, before its color scheme was changed to the brown one that we know today. As well as the markings on its body being flipped in the final version, as you can see here. Before, when they were pointing more towards the left, and in the final game they were pointing more towards the right. But let's get a closer look at these sprites. There's quite a few of them. Estrel's face even looks a bit different here, too. I'm kind of glad they changed its color scheme to brown because this purplish color scheme, more reminiscent to Drober's color scheme, doesn't exactly show off the ground type too well, at least in my personal opinion. So I'm glad they went with brown instead. Shows off more of its ground typing. Like, it makes more sense. You can glance at it and go, hey, that's clearly a ground type. Here, with this purplish color scheme, you can't do that as well, I'd say. And this back spray looks a little stilted. Alright, now we're getting into the final parts of its design, where now we get the pose that we have in the final game, though with still this purplish color scheme. And as time goes on, you can see more of that into its final design. And then a closer look at that with the left markings on its belly area. And then one last look before the final design. Next up, Autono with this slightly different looking face and a lighter color scheme. And this other sprite over here, this looks a little different as well. Alright, now the entire timber line definitely looks much different. Instead of having logs, a girder, and concrete, they're holding a bunch of rocks. So that tells me the timber line was originally going to be rock fighting type, which honestly would have been cool. I kind of wish they stuck with that. But oh well, I kind of like this beta design too. It looks even more delinquentish than the final design for timber. Like, it's just going to throw that rock right at your head. A beta girder isn't half bad either, actually. Beta Conkelder, on the other hand, though, kind of sucks, because this really awful looking design, like, why does it look like he's flying, like, with his propeller looking mustache and that giant rock on the bottom of his body? This one just looks stupid. I guess they just gained the ability to fly or something. I don't know. Let's look at the back sprite as well. Our next up, Temple. The entire Temple line, in fact, has a significantly different design. Fun fact, the Temple line initially was going to be a bug water type Pokemon that we see right over here before they were later changed to the Temple line. This thing over here looks like a little mollusk. And honestly, this middle stage evolution kind of looks like Marshtomp. Am I the one who sees this? I don't know. And finally, this one, right over here, which actually would have been cool. I kind of hope they revisit this idea one of these days. But going back to Beta Temple over here with this honestly really ugly looking design, I'm glad they changed. And then Palpitoad's again seen better days. Good lord, what happened to you, man? Bro, spending too much time in the dark. And Beta Seismitoad. I don't think I'd like him nearly as much if he actually looked like this, I'm just saying. And one notable thing about Seismitoad's back spread over here is, notice how the little pupils on its back are black in color instead of the greenish ones that we get in the final game. Plus, the other parts of its color scheme on the back are a bit brighter than in the final game as well. So taking a look at that. Alright, now throw this horrible looking sprite. Alright, next up they have a bit of a duller color scheme over here as well. And Beta Sock, just Beta Throw, but blue color scheme. And then Sock over here again, but this time it's got a bit of a lighter color scheme. And next up Swaddle, its sprites are mostly the same, so we don't need to talk about that. Alright, and the white sprite for Swadloon over here earlier, here is what it looks like. Kind of glad they changed it to yellow, because it looks like it's gotten its soul ripped out of it. Leavanny looks the same, so we don't need to talk about that. Venopede's got a different sprite throughout time. And here's what this first one looks like. Alright, and here's another early revision of its sprite with a different head shape. And this last one is different before we get to the final one. Alright, not much too different with Whirlipede, just a more grayish color scheme over here instead of purple. And Scolipede doesn't look that different either, but looks a bit shorter and is a much brighter red color. That's all. Kind of looking like it's shiny, actually. Icondi's pretty much the same. Whimsicott's slightly different, but only slightly. A little more strikes again, but Petal Sprite also looks a little different too. Little against the same. Like, I guess with a slightly different pose, its back sprite is angled differently, but that's about it. Nothing too notable, I'd say. Alright, Basculin had a completely different design, even completely different pose. Honestly, I kind of wish they stuck with this pose, but this pose is also more reminiscent of like a front-facing Gen 4 sprite, so that's likely why they changed it. But I kind of like this blue color scheme that's got going on. That tells me that maybe originally we weren't going to have red and blue striped Basculin, but instead, this blue Basculin with red stripes, perhaps? Who knows? In my opinion, I mean, we'll later see this with Basculegion and Legends Arceus, but in my opinion, the red striped Basculin and blue striped Basculin should have evolved into like two different Pokemon or something. Maybe red stripe would evolve into something like this, while blue striped evolved into something more Leviathan-ish, I guess. I don't know. They clearly didn't use their imagination too much with Basculin. This Basculin was purely added just because there weren't that many water types in the style, or in not the style, but in the Unova Pokedex. So it's the only reason it was even added in the first place, which is kind of sucky. But that's what we got. Next up, Sandile doesn't look that different. Crocorock doesn't look that different, honestly. Crocodile doesn't look too different either. It's got all the same sprites. Darmaka looks a bit different. Yeah, not that different, I'd argue. And then for some reason uses this placeholder Zorua sprite. Alright, Crocodile. Most sprites are kind of the same, only I'd say this sprite looks a little different in the eye area where it's supposed to resemble sunglasses, looking a little brighter, but that's about it. It kind of makes it look derpy as well because of it. That slight change makes it look like that. Alright, Darmanitan looks widely the same, though its face is a little whiter, or lighter. As you can see here, the Zen mode form looks a little different as well. It's like it's squatting a bit farther. Alright, Maractus uses Whimsicott's sprite as a placeholder, but the sprite is mostly the same. Now, I don't think I mentioned this during the playthrough, but originally the Wubble and Crustle were going to be Bug Fire type instead of Rock Bug type. Because originally their shells were originally going to be based on those little, like, what am I call it? Like clay? They're going to be based on, how do I say, it's like clay sculptures. Those round clay sculptures you'd see in, like, kennels and pottery users would make. And pottery artists would make, like, it was going to be based on pottery clay and stuff. I think the reason they didn't go with the idea is because they were already making Larvesta and Volcarona and didn't want to overlap those typings. I mean, we'll see a lot of Pokemon overlapping type combos in later generations. Looking at you, Skeledirge and Ceruledge and Scarlet and Violet. But yeah. Or Paldean and Aquabri Tauros and Coclival. Or Wochian and Masquerada. We'll see that a lot in later generations, so they likely didn't want to overlap with that. But here's what those look like. Alright, this beta Scraggy sprite is kind of funny. Again, he really has seen better days. And this Scrafty sprite looks so weird. A part of me kind of wishes they kept this, or at least has some weird rare variant or something, because what is this? Like, just he looks like he's related to Yoshi in some way, but he's not right in the head, let's just say. But anyways, this Sigil sprite looking a little bit different, just less detail pretty much. Otherwise, it's widely the same. Alright, next up, Yamask, which seems to use this deer-looking design, early design for Sawsbuck as a placeholder, and here's the early design with Sawsbuck using Yamask's color scheme. Wonder why they chose Sawsbuck of all Pokemon to be its placeholder. I don't know. But otherwise, the MS sprite does look a little different, is much larger compared to the final version. Also has much more detail in it, if that makes sense. Like, you'll mostly see it in its eye. Alright, one last look at this beta sprite. Alright, this beta sprite for Cofagrigus actually kind of like. The only difference really being its hands. Its hands looking a lot spikier and actually makes it look a bit more freaking slightly scarier. I wonder how that would have transitioned into 3D models in the 3DS games and in Sword and Shield. But otherwise, it's mostly the same. Alright, next up, Beta Tortuga, which is reminiscent to that one picture that we see in the Generation 2 magazine before that game released. A lot of people say that that design is what later became Tortuga, and this kind of helps support that. Plus, later sprites will be a little closer to the final design, but a bit of a lighter and duller blue color than what we get here. Alright, Beta Caracasta, which I kind of like this brownish blue color scheme they got going on here. This doesn't look half bad. And then later revisions will have the same thing that earlier Tortuga had. Alright, Archon mostly looks the same. Its sprite is a little different, has a bit less detail, and especially its back sprite over here. Next up, Archeops, looking actually much more different. I kind of like this fiercer look it's got going on, and it's a little less derpy looking than we see in the final version. Alright, next up, Trubbish, and he has seen some things. Oh boy, Trubbish has had better days. Glad they changed this, because what is that? And there is not much detail in that sprite either. Plus, this back sprite also is extremely undetailed, and kind of has Cotton's color scheme. Alright, Garbode over here looks like he's also seen some things. Like, you must have told him a really bad secret, and he's like, what, really? He looks so surprised, and for what? I'd like to know what he was told. Or what happened that he's so surprised about. This back sprite's got some odd colors and not much detail. Azara and Zorak are significantly different with their designs, looking a lot wispier, and I think these designs were later used for the Hisuian forms in Legends Arceus. And then Zorak's got more of a mane going on over here than it did in the final version. Plus, instead of it actually has more of a tail over here instead of its hair kind of acting like it's both a ponytail and a tail. Which, in my opinion, is a pretty genius part of its final design. That I'm kind of glad they went with instead of this. Alright, Minchino's kind of the same, though its back sprite has different color schemes. Being more of a grayish cream color. Once again, a little more placeholder sprite. And Chinchino is pretty much the same, just some slight color differences, like this. Its fur being mostly white and not much color detail. Taking a bit to load. Gothita looks like it's on some sort of drug or something. God, jeez, I don't know if she's smoking. She's vibing like a motherfucker, isn't she? And this back sprite doesn't have much color in it. It's got a bit of color, it just doesn't fit. And this Beta Gothorito kind of looks like it could be a part dark type. And the entire Gothitol line really looks like they've been smoking something. Just why do their eyes look like that? Beta Solosis. I kind of like this little facial expression it's making. You already know how much I like the Solosis line. Devotion. I kind of like this final design for Devotion as well. It kind of looks more tankish. Before we get to that, this design for Solosis does look a little bit different, but closer to the final. Its facial expression is a bit different as well. Yeah, this one over here, how it has extra bubbles around the bottom area, or whatever you want to call that. It kind of looks like instead of it floating, it would have, like, ran across the ground kind of like a tank or something. And then some other later sprites with different posing than what we see in the final game. Though it's lost those little extra bubbles that out at the bottom of its body. And Aruniclus, I mean, its later sprites are mostly the same over here with slight differences like its eye positioning. But otherwise, this one over here, much less detail, but still kind of looks like it's still reaching out for a hug, even more so than this final sprite. And then here's this other sprite over here, once again with different eyes. Different eye positioning, I should say. Beta Ducklet, mostly the same for its later sprites, maybe some slight facial differences, but this one looks a little different. Alright, and Swanna next. Its later sprites look closer to the final, just a little less detail, but this one looks a little different, with much less detail. Alright, next up, Vanillite. Mostly the same, just less detail. Vanillish, mostly the same, less detail. Can't change much of Peak, can you? I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that, aren't I? And Vanillish, mostly the same, just way less detail. Alright, the entire Deerling line, pretty much sprites are the same, maybe some slight color differences, that's about it. Alright, Sawsbuck's looking a little different. Here's that beta Sawsbuck sprite we saw earlier when we were talking about Yamask. So we already looked at that, but then we got these other beta sprites before it gets closer to its final design, with its different seasons. Definitely looking a little closer to Bambi over here. More so than it already was. And I guess a lot of these sprites were just placeholders before they got to the different season forms. Beta Emolga looks a bit more monstrous, if you will. Looks a bit more wild, which I'm glad they kind of changed that. Looks a bit softer now in later versions. Where in these two sprites, its color scheme is a bit lighter. Like a lighter gray color, if you will. Alright, next up, Beta Caroblast. Like this one over here, not much detail, but where are his eyes? I don't know. And then the later sprite is just staring into your soul, like straight on. Glad they changed that because that's a little creepy. And then we get this final sprite over here. Now, Beta Scavalier, I like this a lot. Like, I kind of wish they stuck with this, but at the same time, I kind of understand why they changed it, because, let's be real, it doesn't really look like a bug type now. Looks more like a pure steel type than a bug steel type, you know? And it makes you wonder, like, where's the Carablast that it evolved from, you know? So that's like the way they changed it. This sprite over here is a bit longer than its final sprite, so they kind of shortened it down just a little bit in later revisions. Kind of wish they didn't. It's slightly larger size, definitely makes it look a bit more imposing. And then we got more detail on these back sprites over here, but once again, it's a bit smaller than what we had before. But honestly, I kind of wish they kept with this, but I understand why they changed it. Alright, Beta Fungus looks much skinnier and with much less detail. Beta Amoongus has a different facial expression. Huh. Imagine how weird this Pokemon would look if it kept with this design, especially in competitive play as one of the best VGC Pokemon. Frillish and both forms of Frillish kind of look the same. I mean, you got this ectoplasmic effect that got going on here. I kind of wish they kept that, actually. That would have been pretty cool animated. But mostly the same, just some shading differences, and that's about it, really. Alright, male Jellicent pretty much looks the same, while the female one, I think they made the female sprite first, most likely. And as I stated during my Nuzlocke, originally the Jellicent and Frillish line were going to be pure water types instead of water ghost type. They were only added to the ghost type because they needed more unique water types in the Unova Dex, that's all. You can tell Lilimo was one of the first sprites they made because this one has more final revisions compared to other Pokemon that we've looked at. Joltik looks just a little different, its feet are a bit different, and that's about it. Alright, Galvantula definitely looks mostly different. Let's Mandal's look and its leg positioning definitely looking a bit different, but that's about it. Alright, Galvantula over here, slightly different sprite with a little less detailing, less color on it than its final design. Apparently Ferroseed was originally going to be blue. But I'm kind of glad they changed it to green, because now it doesn't really look like a grass type. So they likely changed it to green just to make it look more like a grass type. Its back sprite is different from its final back sprite, but only slightly. It's slight color differences, that's it. Blue Ferrothorn isn't real, it won't hurt you. Blue Ferrothorn. And looking a lot flatter, too. Maybe they could have made it shiny colors, but the shiny colors we got are still pretty cool. Brown Clink. Maybe make a ground steel type in a future game? I don't know. Other than that, its later sprites are pretty much the same as the final. Brown Clang. Kind of looks more rustic with the brown color. They could definitely make that original variant like a Rusty Gear Pokemon, making it steel ground type or something. Or steel poison type for tetanus, you know? Alright, and then Beta Klinklang. It doesn't have that steel spike ring, but instead has this little extra blue cog over here, and that's it. I mean, that's kind of how it was. I mean, that's the point of Clink. As the evolution goes on, it builds on the previous model. It's a decent idea, but they definitely could have had better execution of it. I didn't mention that during the Nuzlocke, but I remember back in elementary school, it's like, it's just Clink. Like, Clang is just Clink with an extra back gear, and Clang is just Clang with two more, like, another gear at the bottom and some spike ring, and that's it. Like, I mean, again, as I just stated, the point of it is that it builds on the previous model, but they really could have done some more with it. If we ever get a Mega Evolution or something for Clang, I hope they take it a bit farther. Dynamo, same design, just less detail. Alright, Electric, same design, a little less detail, and a bit of a different color scheme, and you see that with its later models as well, or its later sprites. With a bit of a duller color scheme over here. Electros is closer to its shiny color, is likely where they got its shiny coloration from. And its eyes look absolutely weird. Again, you've seen some things. And then the later sprite, not too notable of a difference. The blue color is just slightly lighter. Now, I really, really like this Eldrim sprite. I kind of wish they kept with this. This looks really good. Instead of pure psychic type, it honestly looks like a psychic ghost type, and I kind of wish they kept this. Because at the time, this was before Lunala and before Confined Form Hoopa, so Psychic Ghost didn't exist as a type combo yet, and it looks like they're kind of headed in that direction with this design. It kind of also reminds me of Ghost Freak from Classic Ben 10. I really wish they kept that. Like, Generation 5 has a lot of pure Psychic types. Like, seriously, Gothitelle, Renico's still my favorite of the pure Psychic types from Gen 5. Mosharna, and Behem. And had this been Psychic Ghost, it would have differentiated it from a bit. It would have differentiated from the other Psychic types a bit. I really wish they kept with that. But I guess they're trying to go for more of the Martian look than a Ghost look, you know? So that's likely why they changed its design. But they really should keep this, or at least bring this back as a regional form someday. That'd be sick. But anyways, Behem. Now this beta Behem sprite looks kind of bad. Anyone else think Behem kind of looks like he's wearing a trench coat in its final design? I don't know. Also, its voice in the anime sucks. Don't listen to it, it's bad. Like, so bad that it's funny. Alright, Lublik, not that much different. Alright, Lampent, different pose, that's kind of it. Like I said with the Vanillish and the Vanillix line, you can't change what's already perfect. So they didn't change these guys that much. Alright, Beta Chandelure just looks a bit dumber. Kind of looks like a little kid drew it. Alright, and Axew, mostly the same. Though it's just got a different color scheme, slightly different color scheme, that's it. And then this sprite makes it look a bit larger, different head shape, and a slightly different pose. Our Fracture looks a bit more different, with some more specks along its body, and a much more angled look. Looking more reminiscent to some sort of dinosaur. And Axorus is the same once again, can't change perfection. Alright, this, actually I kind of like this Cubchoo sprite more, it looks kind of derpy. Alright, this quadruped one is kind of funny looking. He's also seen something really surprising, good lord. So I kind of like this more than the final design, even if the final design is cute as hell, but still. And this one kind of looks like it was a bit of a precursor to Pancham. I can see this being a regional form for Pancham, honestly. And then this other beta sprite with it standing instead of sitting down like in this final sprite. Which again, I guess will later be its inspiration for its 3D model. But the sitting down sprite is probably the cutest one. Also reminds me of that kid from Legend of Zelda Wind Waker with the constant snot bubble out of his mouth, or out of his nose. I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if Cubchoo was slightly based on that kid as well. Same with Arctozolt and Sword and Shield. Alright, Beta Beartic being quadruped, which I'm glad they changed that. This looks kind of dumb. I remember back when I was in elementary school when I used to make my own Fakemon, I made a polar bear Pokemon much like Beartic, and I named it Blizzard Drill for some reason. I don't know, I didn't really think of the naming schemes too much back then. And then we got this beta sprite. He kind of just looks like someone's angry father. And we got another one of its beta sprites with a more Arctic-ish color scheme with a lighter blue instead of white like we see in its final design. But again, just like Ursaring, I really hope Beartic gets some sort of evolution in the future. Alright, next up Cryogonal. It's the same design, just looks like a crude drawing that a 5-year-old made. That's about it. Shelmet was originally going to have some extra detail over here. Looks a bit wider and a little less detail. And then one of its other sprites is a bit larger than its final sprite. And then this design for a Selgor was originally actually going to be an evolution for Carablast before the gimmick of Shelmet and Carablast trading with each other to evolve came to be. So this is originally what Shelmet or what a Carablast was going to evolve into instead of a Scavalier. And we have another beta sprite for Selgor, just looking to the side, I guess. He don't care. He's unfazed. This Stunfisk sprite I actually kind of like more than the final. It looks more like a water type, and looks like it would actually live in the water. More so than Stunfisk. And maybe it was originally going to be water electric instead of ground electric. I'm kind of glad they went with the ground electric design, but still. And as stated over here, Stunfisk originally had blue skin instead of brown, much larger pupils, an open mouth, and a shorter tail fin, aligned with previously known statements about its early design and water electric typing. So yeah, it was originally going to be a water electric type instead of ground electric. Alright, that build over there uses the final design, but with a larger front sprite and a less flattened pose on the back of its sprite. And here's a closer look at this beta sprite. Alright, and this back sprite's a little different to the final. I kind of hope we get a regional form to Stunfisk in the future where it's water electric. MFU just has a bit of a different pose. That's about it. And again, a little less detail and a little less color in this design. Arm Shell looks a little different, but mostly the same. Just has some less detail. This sprite's also slightly larger than the final, but not notable enough for us to look at it. Alright, just like the sprite, the menu sprite we saw earlier, is an early design for Druddigan, which I think looks pretty cool. Kind of looks like he's trying to eat a really big sandwich, like a really big imaginary sandwich, though, and he's kind of enjoying it. Let's look at the back sprite, too. Why not? And now he just looks like he's trying to scare some little children. Alright, Beta Golid. Definitely looks a little off-model, I guess. Like, one of its arms definitely looks larger than the other one. Alright, Golurk is just staring forward and not much detail. Poniard, not much detail in this design, and really uninteresting pose. Bisharp, same deal. I guess it looks a bit more menacing than Poniard, but whatever. Alright, this beta, a Buffalat sprite. Less detail, but mostly the same as what we see in the final. Alright, beta Rufflet. It's got much less detail and a bit of a different pose. It's got more of a wise eagle look, which it's a pre-evolution. It's not supposed to look wise. So glad they changed that. Beta Breviary mostly looks the same, but again, different details and different pose. Volby, different pose and different details. Bit of a browner color scheme as well. Mandibuzz, most of the same pose, but once again, less detail. And Humor looks a bit skinnier and has white claws instead of yellow claws, but later iterations will be the same as its final iteration. And as I've stated during my playthrough of all the fire types in Gen 5, Humor is easily the most forgettable and least useful. Yeah, and that's saying something when Simisear exists. As someone who likes Simisear, it pains me to say that, but it is true at the same time. Alright, Durant's just got a little less detail and a bit of a duller color scheme, and that's it. Looks a little less shiny as well. And here is another very different sprite in the beta DNO line. Now, I remember mentioning in my playthrough the entire DNO line was originally based on tanks, as well as their naming scheme being the German words for 1, 2, and 3. And we can see that here with their little tank designs and the little treads on their body over here, starting with Zweilous and then later Hydreigon. That we see in their final designs too, if you're wondering all those lines on Hydreigon's body. Same with Zweilous' body, being precursors to the fact that there's going to be based on a tank. I kind of hope we get some sort of tank dragon in a future game. Pokemon and Uranium kind of has something like that. But anyways, here's a closer look at this sprite. Alright, now we get closer to the final design, but it's a little smaller and has white fur instead of black fur. Alright, then Zweilous kind of just being a green and gray dragon with 2 heads. decently interesting, but much less interesting compared to its final design. And here's one that's closer to its final design, but a lighter color scheme. And here's that same beta sprite, but with a different color of its beta design before we got closer to the final design. And the beta Hydreigon, I kind of like this more, but obviously the final design's better. I don't think this would transition too well in 3D. Hydreigon's final design definitely transitioned way better into 3D. And its sprite over here is definitely much smaller compared to its final design. So let's have a closer look at this. Am I the one who thinks these like little nubs down here are supposed to be Hydreigon's feet or something? But because it's known as the brutal Pokemon at some point during its evolution, maybe the legs got ripped off or something. Either that or because it's got such mastery over floating, it doesn't really need to be on the ground anymore. I don't know. Alright, Larvesta, mostly similar to its final design, but much less detail, and whatever this is, kind of looks like it's trying to be a painting of some sort, but not doing that too well. Same with Volcarona, though. I think it does that painting aspect a little bit better. You can tell somebody definitely had a little fun making this bit of artwork. Looks a little wispier compared to its final design as well. And apparently this was mentioned in a Nintendo Dream interview back in 2011. April 2011 even. Like a month after the game came out in the US. Funny. This beta Cobalion sprite, a part of me actually kind of likes this. Kind of looks like a sort of demon horse, but not too much detail. It's really just eyes and the wispy looking antlers it's got going on that actually look really cool in my opinion. They could have kept some of that into its final design, but I mean the wispy looking antlers is kind of the only thing they kept. This sprite is widely the same compared to the final version, but yeah, a bit of a different face and slightly wider body. And this sprite looks a little different to it as well, just its eyes are slightly different, not too notable. This beta Terrakion sprite is actually really good. I already liked Terrakion's design, but not gonna lie, I hope this becomes like a regional form or something. Makes him look more like a bull of some sort. And honestly, it's really cool. The horns, the pose is actually pretty neat. The eyes are cool. I kind of wish they kept something like that. But final Terrakion I'm still happy with. One thing is it doesn't really look like a rock type like its final design. And beta Verizon Wireless or Verizon over here looks pretty cool too, actually. But again, much less detail. Much more masculine posing compared to its final design, which looks a bit more feminine. Its horns are much different, and it's got different eyes, too. Alright, beta Tornadus. This is like the meme says, this is just straight up man. Like, if you thought the final design was just straight up man, this is definitely a straight up man, just on a cloud. With a weird looking face and its tail is significantly different. Imagine that thing running around at VGC. And then continuing with Thunderous design, just a straight up man. Alright, beta for Reshiram that we saw in previous videos. It has a bit more of an ancient look to it with all those markings around his body. So I kind of see why they toned it down a little bit to make it look a little less detailed and a little less over designed. But still, I kind of like the slight primal look it's got going on here. Same with Zekrom over here. At this, a lot of those greenish markings everywhere. And unlike Reshiram, Zekrom has some different sprites to its final design as well, where it's more of a lighter grayish color than the more black that we see. I remember back when I was in elementary school, getting like a Happy Meal from McDonald's back in the 4th grade. Yes, in the 4th grade. I remember getting this little Zekrom toy that I think I still have somewhere, actually. And it's a bit of a lightish gray color, kind of like this sprite, instead of the darker black that we see in the final design. Alright, and once again, Landorus without the tail, unlike its other brethren. And once again, just a straight up man. I wonder what a beta Enamorus with a similar design scheme to this would look like. But we'll probably never know that. And as I've stated in previous videos, Beta Kyurem over here kind of looks like a Monster Hunter monster. I've seen some people describe it as a Ben 10 monster or alien. I don't see that. Honestly, it looks more like a Monster Hunter monster to me. Kind of reminds me of Elatreon, which Kyurem and Elatreon should really be in a fight at some point. Not a question of the day, but between those two, who do you think would win? I hear Elatreon wins that, but slightly off topic. Along with that, it seems that Kyurem was originally going to have these different color schemes, like this rustic brownish color scheme it's got over here, and then this blue color scheme. I have a feeling this might be an early version of Black Kyurem and White Kyurem that we'll see in the game's sequels, but imagine if this is what they stuck with. Hey, you fuse with Reshiram, you're a little bit of a reddish color now. Hey, you fuse with Zekrom, you're a bit of a bluish color now. That is so bland and boring. I am so glad they didn't go with that. And stated over here in this description, Placeholder slots for terms also forms in the sequels were introduced in March, but were deleted later on. So, well, these were just placeholder forms, I guess, before they made Black Kyurem and White Kyurem's design. So good to know about that, I suppose. Alright, we're almost done with this. Next up, Keldeo, kind of closer to its final design, and this is before its Resolute form was made, which isn't even available until Black and White 2. But it's definitely kind of reminiscent to its final design, only its hooves are a orangish color, same color as this mane over here, instead of blue like we see in the final. And not much detail, very rough looking design. Alright, and this one's definitely much skinnier than its final design. And I still really like Keldeo. I have so much nostalgia using it back in elementary school. And as I mentioned in previous videos, Beta Meloetta kind of looks more like it would be a bug type rather than a normal psychic type in its other form, normal fighting type. This looks more like it could have been the first normal bug type, and a part of me kind of wishes they kept with that theme, but no, I'm still happy with the Meloetta we got. And then originally its alternate form, its pure form, was literally just gonna be the same form but green and still singing instead of dancing. I remember back in elementary school I used to call it the singing and dancing Pokemon, before I started referring to it by its actual name of Meloetta, of course. And some of its beta sprites over here, its hair kind of looks the same, just slightly brighter green, which I think looks a little better than its final color scheme. And same with its pure form, looking slightly different. And its back sprite looks slightly different as well with its eyes. Or just its eye. Alright, and finally, widely different Genesect. Just blue and its kittens are a little different. Notice how in this little beta sprite of Genesect over here, the drive on its back is a whitish color. Maybe that was originally going to represent it having no drive at all, instead of it being like an orangish color like we see in the final game. But originally Genesect was going to be this blue color, and I guess it looks closer to its lore about it being a prehistoric Pokemon before Team Plasma changed it. So that probably is where that comes from. And I'm not going to look at all these different sprites, but some of them have the different drives on the back, like this green one. Perhaps we were originally going to have a grass-type Technoblast that ended up going unused. Since in the final game we only have normal-type Technoblast, water, fire, electric, and ice. I mean, which is a pretty decent gimmick at the end of the day, and it's one of the few Pokemon to have a stab move, or not stab move, a signature move that it doesn't get stabbed from in any way. If Genesect existed in Skull and Violet, Terra Water Genesect would be everywhere, and that would be so good. I really wish that was a thing, but oh well. Maybe in Pokemon Champions. But now we'll get into some more unused Pokemon. That being this unused Godzilla-like Pokemon, which I honestly have a theory later became Excalibur, because this design is very similar. Again, it's got a finished sprite and everything. Maybe it went unused because they couldn't think of any pre-evolutions to make this with, or they ran out of time to make some pre-evolutions for it. I really hope they bring this back someday. Who knows? Maybe it'd be a similar situation to Salamence and Metagross, where both of them were the pseudo-legendaries of their respective region, and maybe we were going to have two pseudo-legendaries in Black and White initially, but that didn't happen. And next up we have this beta mouse-looking sprite, which looks pretty cool. It has a finished animation as well, which, again, really would be nice if this were a sort of event Pokemon. And then we have this thing called Gorokin or whatever. It's a dog-like Pokemon, which I can kind of see it. More like a mix of a dog and a sort of rodent. Definitely was going to be normal type. Maybe an earlier version of a Lillipup in some way. And here's those mollusk Pokemon we were talking about earlier that later became the Time Pool line, which were originally going to be water and bug type. And as stated over here, the first stage of the Scrap family of sea snail Pokemon, this evolutionary line might have been the original rivals to Carablast before Shelmet was designed. The Carablast evolution line that Ken Sugimori mentioned in the interview. And here's a closer look at that. It's actually quite adorable. I like this one. I want it as a pet. I honestly almost wanted more of a pet than Shellos and Gastrodon. Alright, this thing, as I've always said, kind of looks like Marshtomp in my opinion. Funny how before Generation 7, Surskit was the only water bug type. Whatever. These guys were originally going to be that. And this shield Pokemon kind of reminds me of a Fakemon in Fakemon on Pokemon Showdown, if y'all know what I'm talking about. It kind of reminds me of that water bug type. This looks pretty cool, too. Kind of like how it uses as a little shield to shield its face. Maybe originally it was going to have its own version of the spiky shield attack. And they all have back sprites that aren't as detailed as their front sprites, it seems. And finally, this beta Carablast evolution before Escavalier was made, which I'm glad. Escavalier is way better than whatever this is. Freaking Carablast evolution with a 80s mother looking haircut. Oh, whatever. Described Carablast evolution. Most likely Carablast's original evolution before the trade evolution between it and Shelmet was planned. And here's a closer look at it. And its back sprite. Alright, now we're done with that lengthy list. And one last thing I want to look at before we end this off. The beta males. Or, don't take that out of context, I didn't mean it like that. Just the old sprites for the male. Almost all of the male items received a minor palette change. Indeed, it is very exciting. I have just minor palette changes, it's kind of it, nothing too notable. Yeah, and I'm not going to look at each of them individually, that would take too long. Funnily enough, this is the last generation where male was even usable to sending to other players and NPCs. And the last time because back in Gen 4 and 5, and I think Gen 3 as well, you can actually have your Pokemon hold male items. And for some reason, when your Pokemon held male items, they actually had some competitive use. Those Pokemon didn't get their get their item knocked off by moves like Knockoff or moves like Trick or Switcheroo, which is kind of funny, actually. I mean, that was before Knockoff was as good as it is now, but whatever. Alright, the Pretty Wing. The Pretty Wing item was originally a bit smaller and differently shaped, more heart-shaped than the feather shape that we get in the final game. Alright, the eject button has a bit of a bland design. I'm glad they changed that. The eject button item was originally much flatter and more yellow. Here's what that looks like. Alright, the ring target looks mostly the same, but it's a bit smaller, it seems. The ring target was slightly smaller. Makes me wonder why they made it a bit larger. I don't know. Fit more with the art style or something of the game. The Castilla icon was just a bland scoop of ice cream before being designed to resemble Vanillite. I'm glad they changed that because, seriously, it's just some ice cream. That's all it is. Alright, the relic items. The relic items found in the undersea ruins were originally brown instead of gray due to water damage. The band was made a bit smaller, the vase was redrawn, and the statue was different. Alright, here's a closer look at all these. I guess we're doing it individually. So them changing it to a gray color because of them being underwater for so long is actually a nice detail. So maybe originally you were going to be able to find these outside of water. And this, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think this little statue somewhat resembles a Noctowl, just a little bit. Our Wonder Launcher guard specs. The Wonder Launcher version of the guard spec, again, I'm glad they didn't have Wonder Launchers in future games. Because being able to use the X items in the middle of battle, I think is a bit busted and definitely would have been banned, which I'm pretty sure was banned in competitive play back then, so I'm glad they didn't bring that back. Held items, early items allowed, thank you. As a single differently colored pixel on left side rim by the line that divided the disc in half. The sprite isn't even that different. I guess the color is slightly different, but that's about it. It's not that notable. The Lure Ball. The 5th generation of Pokemon games were the first ones to depict the Lure Ball with a blue top half. I don't remember that, I'll be honest. I played a lot of Pokemon Heart Gold back in elementary school, and I don't remember the Lure Balls being green back then. I could have sworn they were blue back then. And Heart Gold Soul Silver design with the top green half was used. It was planned to be used in Black and White until it was changed very late in development. Even though you can't even get a Lure Ball in the Gen 5 games but under normal means. Same with the other Gen 2 balls, but whatever. You know, Level Ball, Heavy Ball, whatever. As a side note, the early design of the Sports Ball was used in the development of Heart Gold Soul Silver and was also present in the repository of Black and White until the same day the Lure Ball was changed. Here's a closer look at this green one, which again, I don't remember the Lure Ball being green. I'm pretty sure it was blue in the Gen 4 games. Specifically in Heart Gold Soul Silver, of course. The S-Transceiver, or the Crash Transceiver, depending on how you say it. The red design of the S-Transceiver specifically originally had a yellow color on the side of the wrist strap. Not too much different. Just that wrist strap as you mentioned, or they mentioned, the text over here. The Liberty Pass. The Liberty Guardian event, which hasn't been around since 2011. I still have that old piece of paper, actually, with my old box art of it that I used back in elementary school. Good times. But anyways, the Liberty Pass, the event item used to access Victini, was originally a very bland orange and yellow colored ticket. The final spruces it up with a picture of the building that Victini resides in. Here's a closer look at that, which I'm kind of glad they changed it, give it a little more detail. Alright, and finally the Godstone. The unused Godstone item originally had a different color scheme, one that matched Kirim's prototype design. They bothered to change it to match the color scheme of Kirim's final design, suggesting it was still planned to be used even at this late stage of development. The early color scheme can be seen in the larger item portrait that can be found and used in the final game, because I guess originally Kirim was also going to be trapped in one of these stones just like Reshiram and Zekrom, and maybe that was going to be a thing in the game sequel, but that didn't come to be. I do kind of like that they were originally going to make it closer to its more Monster Hunter looking design. But that's all of those unused sprites. We got unused shiny Pokemon sprites as well, but nothing too notable, I'd say. I made some really neat looking colors, I suppose. A lot of it's just inverted colors, though. And some of these shiny Pokemon, and I guess this was originally going to be Shiny Fracture, which it's literally just a grayer version of its design, that's it. Dynamo literally barely changes. A lot of these are just inverted colors. As I mentioned, once again, White Slot Loon, and its final design kind of gets to that. The entire Timber line were originally going to have blue veins instead of, like, orangish artery-looking ones. Honestly, this old Gigalith shiny model looks really good. And I guess the Elemental Monkeys were originally just going to be different, or going to be swapped colors of each other, it looks like. And I guess they stopped with that at Panpour. Beat-Up looks a little bland. Yeah, Superior looks widely the same as its final, but a little more green in its design. Victini has some inverted colors going on here. Its eyes looking different. Beta shiny Drodigan Gothita. And Scolipede having this huge monochrome color scheme doesn't look the best, which I'm glad they changed that. More inverted colors like what Yamask. I guess originally Shiny Stunfisk was going to be closer to its beta design that we saw before. I kind of wish they kept with that. I mean, this shiny isn't bad, but I kind of wish they kept with something like this. Shiny Volleyball is pretty much the same. I didn't go to the final aside from lighter brown feathers on the body and head. Yeah, just slightly darker brown it looks like. While the final design is a little bit lighter brown. And Terrakion was originally going to have this purplish color scheme. And palette broke a couple of times due to the sprite itself getting updated. With this once again inverted looking colors. Nothing too notable, but some of these changed shinies like the Gigalith one are really cool. Let's have a slight closer look at least this one. Like, this is something I honestly hope they wish they stuck with. I mean, the final shiny is still really good, don't get me wrong, but yeah, originally had the same skin color as its original form, and its spikes are lime green instead of cyan in the final. This probably was included alongside its initial inclusion in the game, suggesting it might have been even older color scheme than it had at the time, rather than an actual intended shiny coloration. Alright, and that's all the unused sprites I have found. We're going to continue with later things with much more things like different audio, unused audio throughout the game. So we'll definitely look at that more in episode 5 of this unused series that we got going on with Pokemon Black and White, because there's still way more things to cover. Anyways, that will be it for this version of unused content in games. Tune in next time for the unused audios. If you enjoyed this and you want to see more and you learned something new today, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and consider it to the course today of all the beta sprites that we went over. Which one would you like to see in the final game and why? I'd say that unused water bug type, or that dragon type Excalibur looking Pokemon that actually has finished animated sprites would have been really cool to see in the final game. But anyways, see y'all in part 5 and have a terrific day. Thank you all for watching.